This is the Fuel Your Life podcast where we help you find, unleash, elevate your leadership in order to create a loving, impactful, freeing energy within you and around you. And now for your hosts, John Troutman and Charles Draper. And we are back. It is the Fuel Your Life podcast with John Troutman and Charles Draper. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you this morning?
Oh, man, I'm good. We're at the lake, so we're enjoying that as a family, and it's been great.
Excellent, yeah. I did just finish playing a little bit of Ultimate Frisbee this morning. I didn't tell you that.
Oh, really?
Pre-talk, yeah. So it was great to get out there, throw some Frisbee around, and run around. I got a little scun up elbow, a little sore ankle, but you know what? There's nothing like throwing a Frisbee, getting after it. Tracking it down. So had a blast this morning with our little F3 group. So
that's awesome. I'm a little jealous. I'm gonna be honest. A little jealous.
You should be.
Yeah.
I really I haven't posted in probably I queued last week, so I probably posted 3 times in the past 3 months. But I heard Ultimate Frisbee and I said, you know what? I'm there. So that's why I had to push this call back, just so you know.
That's worth it. I will take that. Because I would do it in a heartbeat as well. Oh, man. Love some Ultimate. So.
Yeah. Well, let's hop in. You know, we started with our topical discussions last week, or last couple weeks, whenever we recorded. But we started on the family and looking at that. And this week we're going to talk about kids a little bit.
Kids.
Kids, children, and just what does that look like, and just key tenets to just parenting that we have learned and failed at, and or just questions we might have, or all the above. Because I have 3 children. I'm no expert. My oldest is about to turn 10, and John, you have 3 as well.
I have 3 children as well. You have 3 girls. I have 3 boys.
That's right.
My oldest is 6. So
yeah.
A few years behind you.
Yeah, my youngest is 3, so I have a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an almost 10-year-old. So, but anyway, so jumping into kids, John, what I'm gonna just start with you on this. What do you feel like is how do you train up your kids, or what do you do on how are you intentional with teaching your kids just the core values you believe, just the Christian worldview that you believe? What does that look like, and what kind of intentionality is there, or lack thereof?
Boy, what does that look like? I'll go with a few different things, but let's start with. Let me say from the beginning, I was a really good parent before I had kids. And I think when you you may have experienced this as well. But when you start seeing your friends have kids, or you start seeing other people have kids, and you're kind of not there yet, and you start thinking, man, like I'm going to be a great parent. Like I'm going to do this differently, or I'm going to do this. I like what they do and stuff. And you start thinking, oh man, I'm just going to be great. And then you have kids and you're like, oh boy, what am I doing? They have a way of pulling out kind of the imperfected pieces of your character. They have a way of testing your patience that I don't know if there's any other relationship that's going to have that same dynamic in life. I will say, I think having kids is something special for that reason, but it's tough. And so I'll start with saying I had that mentality, whether I would have not wanted to admit it, but before I had kids, I definitely had that mentality. And you have kids, and it's like, man, boy, there are some pieces to grow in. But I say that a little bit because I think there's 2 main areas. Like if I was going to boil it down to this is how I want to really teach my kids and how I want to develop them as people and as humans who are going to be able to contribute to the world in a way that's going to show and reveal the kingdom of God. And I start saying it that way because I think it's important to start with the end in mind. And I don't think we think about that with raising children. And that's a principle from the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, that when you start looking for that, it shows up everywhere. That principle of just starting with the end in mind. And when I look at my children, I recognize, like, I'm not raising them to be great kids. Hopefully that happens. But I'm raising them to be great adults, to be great parents, to be great grandparents. I'm raising them for the long haul. And when I think about it that way, there's 2 pieces that I want to instill in them. The first is character. I really want to focus on who they are, not as much on what they do. I want to focus on who they are. And the way that plays out, we actually have talked about, if you run back to one of our first 3 episodes, we kind of talked about setting up, I call them rules for life, but core values for our family. We both walked through that process. I still think that's been hugely beneficial for us. Yeah. We still use that all the time to go back. That's one way that we're helping shape the character. And then I'll use this as an example. So my son, my oldest, just finished kindergarten and loved it. I mean, he's the oldest child through and through, so he follows the rules. And he wants to obey all the rules. Now, our middle child, that's going to be interesting when he gets to kindergarten. I think he'll thrive, but he's not the rule follower like our oldest son. And so our oldest son, he thrived. And when he started kindergarten, his handwriting was awful. You know, most kindergartners probably are not very great at writing at that point, but it was something to behold. It was not good. And by the end of his school year, they have Handwriting Hero, the accolade. And he was getting Handwriting Hero at least once a week, for the last probably 2 months of school. And so he would come home all the time and be like, yeah, I got Handwriting Hero. And I tried to be. This is one thing that I think I did well. But instead of saying, oh, congratulations on getting Handwriting Hero, I would say, oh, congratulations. Your handwriting was really bad when you started, but you've worked really hard to make it good. And that's an awesome thing, to work hard at something. And so celebrating the process and helping develop the character instead of celebrating the outcome. I do think that makes a difference. And he's learning the value of working hard at something to see it through, and not just being good at something right from the beginning, because he has that expectation, which I have. So, and the second thing I would say is developing practices. I am not an intentional person, but I think when it comes to parenting specifically, the practices that you instill in your family and the consistency that you can bring are what's going to really, it's going to catch. I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, so I'll stay with what I'm saying. But when you learn to instill practices, and they can be simple, but we eat dinner all the time together. I mean, almost every night. We hardly ever don't eat dinner together. But instilling the practice of valuing relationships and sitting down having dinner together, instilling the practices of reading together, we sing together at night, just the different practices you have in your family are, over time, it's just building that consistency and building that foundation to help your children stand on. So I think specifically, as I think of following Jesus, it's a lot of the practices that we're instilling in our family that I'm hoping to build on for the long haul.
Good. What have you, or as I become a parent, what I do is I've really been reflecting on how my parents raised me. Mm-hmm. And really it has brought a lot of appreciation for what my parents instilled in me and how they raised me and different things like that. What are some key takeaways? Because I believe that we're all a byproduct of what we experienced from our parents, whether we pick up the good things or whether we pick up the bad things. So what would you say are key things that you believe your parents instilled in you that you've carried over, things that you've caught and have continued on?
Yeah, there's definitely good and bad in that. That's a great question. Um, and I'll start here because I think if there's any people who are younger or have come from a harder situation with the family, they may experience this even more and may be feeling this. But I'll say, I think you go through a season of almost blaming your parents at times for some of your shortcomings when you start seeing those. I went through that season a little bit in my college years. Um, and I was fortunate in two ways. One is I have great parents. I can't say enough about the parents that I have. I value what they've instilled in me so much, which I'm going to get to. So that was helpful. But two, I had great friends and I had a great relationship with the Lord so that I could quickly, start saying, wait a second, I've been super blessed. And so I even during that season, but I do think there's a season, a hard season that comes in during that time too, when you start reflecting on this. And I would encourage you, if you walk through that, don't focus only on the negative, but see the positive that your parents have instilled in you, because there's always positive, always, if you
And
want to
just
see it.
disclaimer, you're talking about before you become a parent, right? You're talking about
Yes, before you become a parent.
pre-parenting, not as you're a parent, like as you're going
Yeah. Well,
through high school, college. Like, I mean, part of your parents, like, they're not there to be your best friend. They're there to guide and direct you. And I
yeah.
agree with you 100%, because part of what I've noticed is that the times where I've just loathed my parents and couldn't stand them, I look back and I say thank you, because now I see why they did.
hmm
I just want to
Yeah,
clarify.
and I
It's
wouldn't even say like, because mine wasn't when I was in the household, and so that's why I say that, because I think even as you get out of the household and you're starting your own family, you start seeing some of your own struggles. Like I'll use an example. My dad has a great sense of humor, which I think was something that I have adopted a little bit. When we have nachos, my kids hate it because I always sit here and use the joke, hey, you can't have any of those. And they're like, why? Because it's nachos. And I stole that from my dad. Oh, man. And it's awful. But anyways,
I like it.
and yeah. And so, you've got the good, but my dad also, like, I've struggled to have really serious conversations with my dad because he doesn't love having those serious conversations and those deep conversation. He loves joking around, and so in many ways that's good. And in times like you need to be able to have deeper conversations, and so you see the good and the bad even as you're becoming a parent. And I just sometimes we can get so focused on what wasn't there or what we feel like was missing, and I just want to encourage us to see both sides, and maybe even focus more on the good. But now to answer your question, I'm sorry that was long-winded, but I think it was worthwhile.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, my parents, I would say, is a couple things that have really stuck, um, that I love, and I think the first is the value of being together. I'll give my mom real credit for this, but also my dad's the same. Like my mom, if she could have things her way, our family would just be together all the time. And she just loves us being together and being able to have the experience of all of us being there. That was the same way growing up. And we were, we valued the time we got together. We valued the time of having family and allowing our family to invest in us, as a, I guess, smaller family unit. So I would say just even the value of being together, the value, like I mentioned, of having meals together. We had meals together all the time. That was not really much of a question. Even as things got busy for us when we got into sports and travel sports and stuff like that, my parents always made a point that we were having dinner together throughout the week. And even as we were traveling to sports, if my brother and I had different sports, parents made a point to be there to whatever extent we could. Um, and I think that's huge in the world where families are becoming more disconnected because we don't just value being together. And I say being together in not as distracted spaces. So it's not just being together and watching TV. So sometimes you may do that, but actually being together and having conversation. So I would say that. I would even just say like some of the practices my parents instilled in me. I mean, we had a devotion every morning when I was younger, especially. We were always at church, which I do value that. We made place to be with other families and to hang out with kids, which I think, we can have this dynamic of just being about us and not making the space to be with other families. And like, that's just that it's healthy to do that, to be with other families. So yeah, I mean, I just think there's probably a lot more that I could go into that I hadn't
Yeah.
even thought about. But I've talked so much for the first 16 minutes, so I want to throw it back to you. And what are you thinking?
No, I mean, just as you talk, just like I kind of was jotting down a few things here that came to my mind, kind of building on that last piece that you said. Like it sounds like your parents taught you and modeled for you how to do community with others,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's super important. That just how do you know as a child how to interact with other families, what true community looks like, how to pick friends, how to pick those individuals, and like so your parents modeled that by saying, hey, listen, we're going to hang out with these families and we're going to do it because they share these key tenets that we share, and we want to have that influence. I don't know, just how to do community I think is super important. And so no, I just wanted to build on that last thought that you had because I think that's super important. And I think sometimes we as parents or just families, we're so isolated. I think COVID has caused that. And I think it's super, I know for me, whenever my kids can see me and my wife partner with other families and do community well, it models for them that that's healthy, that's good. Um, and I just think it's so important, especially today, especially I think in any time frame, we're meant for community. So you must model that for your children. And if you model that we don't commune with others, we don't get together with others, we don't do that, and that's what they're going to do whenever they get older. So, but anyways,
Mm-hmm.
a couple other things that came to mind just as you talked about character and practices. Um, I really just being present for me is a huge thing with my kids, and you hit all over it in different things that you said, but be present. And what I mean by that is, you can be in the same room and not be present. You can be in the
Mm-hmm.
same room and everybody be on their phones and the kids be on a device and TVs. Our kids don't have devices. That's just something we've landed on in our household. The only thing that they have is the TV. And right now, I just got tired of them watching the TV, so I told them they don't get to cut the TV on unless mom and dad does. And you know what? Attitudes have changed.
Mm-hmm.
What they are doing has changed because it's caused everybody to be more present. So just it's something that I try to do a check on, and I have to be careful because I can pick up that little rectangular device called a phone and get sucked into it just as good as anybody else. But me and my wife are always holding another accountable. Hey, are we being present right now? Like our kids are here, they're asking for our attention, they're asking for this, they're asking for that. So just being present, being present. I think having fun. I think if you're being present, then you have fun. I think you got to have a good time with your kids. You got to, be able to really just have fun with them. Go and play ball with them. Go jump through the sprinkler in the front yard. My kids were pumped. It was maybe Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday night. They came over and they said that the neighbor wants us to do water balloons. I said, it's late. We got to get to bed. How about this? Tuesday, I'll be home. I'll put a water sprinkler out in the front yard. You know what? They had my wife's phone out, was on Life 360 waiting on me to pull in the driveway, was waiting out in the driveway for me to come in. And buddy, as soon as I pull in, everyone's like, we were watching Dad, you're home. I was like, what's going on? I completely forgot. They said, you said we could do sprinklers. So I put the sprinkler out. We jumped through the sprinklers. and just the joy on their face, but don't miss those moments. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're not present and you're not there, then that doesn't happen. So I don't know. I think being present feeds into having fun. Um, and then just, put your money where your mouth is. If you say that, treat others the way you want to be treated, then live by it. If
Mm-hmm.
things you say, do, and they're going to catch more than you teach them at times. But if you're not there, they can't catch it. If you're not there and you're not present, I just go back to being present. That you can't teach them, you can't train them. I think back to Paul. I'm doing a study on Paul right now, and the past 2 weeks I've had to lead it, and Paul constantly went around to different areas, whether it's Corinth, Ephesus, Philippi, those, and he stopped for a time period and just taught, for a year and a
Mm-hmm.
half. It took time, it took perseverance, it took patience, so if we don't invest time in our kids, we're going to get what we invest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of things are caught not taught. A lot of those things. So I don't know. I think those are the things I really land on. I think of a lot of different stories. Just I want to instill in my kids hard work. I want to instill in my kids that nothing's given to you. That you got to be honest, you got to be truthful. But at the end of the day, I want them to love the Lord, know the Lord. At the end of the day, that's first and foremost. But how do I model that?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? Are we?
Yeah.
So I think those are the important things, and they honestly, whenever they see me up reading my Bible in the morning, I don't have to say anything. They
Mm-hmm.
see that, they know that. Whenever we pray over people that are sick, that we know, friends that are sick, people that are hurting, and we spend that time, or we talk about spiritual things. Just hey, mom and dad struggling right now with this decision. Let's pray about it as a family. Being transparent in that sense, and just really teaching them how to do life, I think is super important. But it takes intentionality. Kids know whenever something's going on. So just recently with my job change, if you notice the office is different behind me. So uh, but I mean, my kids knew about the job change coming, and we prayed about it as a family, and I explained to them, like, um, we just want to be doing what the Lord's will is. And they said, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? And whenever you start trying to teach that to a 7, 9 year old, what the Lord's will is. But I mean, how powerful is it? Because it's not just, we're not talking about it. We're saying, hey, listen, we're moving in faith that this is what the Lord wants. And um, if you don't spend that time talking to them about it, then how are they going to know?
Mm-hmm.
How will they ever know? And so I don't know. I've rambled long enough, but those are just some initial thoughts on my end. So.
I mean, I think it's, and I like the way you say it because, saying be present. You know, even as we've talked and as I was sharing, and you're right, I was all around it, but how often, I think I've even mentioned this, I know to you, but even on the podcast before, of just showing up and it's like, I don't really bring good energy. Like I'm not showing up with really wanting to be present. My mind's still on something else that was happening or some other thing. Who knows? So I'm sitting here around my kids and playing with my kids, and yet I'm not really there, and they know it. They feel that, or I'm giving them the leftovers of the day. Like I've put all my energy into something else, and I'm showing up, and I'm like, shitting on the couch, and they're being crazy, and it's like, yeah, I don't really want to. And I tell you, it's tough to go out and play trucks over and over and over again. Like, even being here at the lake, it's tough. I sitting here and swimming in some of the, like, they have a little place that's probably 3 feet deep in there, and my boys love just swimming in that area and being out there, and it's like, man, I've dried off now. I don't really want to get back in. But choosing to do those things, and when you have those rules for life and your kids know them, the hardest thing that you will ever experience as a parent is when your kid calls you out. It's like, hey, don't you do hard things? Oh yeah, I do. Okay, like um, anyways, I just as you were talking, I was thinking through those things. So,
Well, see, I enjoy when they call me out because it means they're listening.
oh yeah,
It means that they've taken that in, and that because the paper's not in front of them, but it means that they're listening. It means that they have captured that tenet that you've mentioned. It also might mean that, hey, listen, it took them calling me out, so then guess what? They know next time they do it, I'm gonna do the same thing. But like that just goes to show that they're catching what you're putting out there,
mm-hmm.
and it's super important. And I really do think, I mean, are we living every day like today could be our last with our kids? I mean, that then playing trucks with our kid isn't hard. Jumping through the sprinkler isn't difficult. It broke my heart last night at Bible study. They talked about a young couple in their low 20s. They had a 3-year-old. It was their first kid, and they laid down to take a nap, and the 3-year-old got outside and fell in the pool, and is now on a vent at the hospital, and they're checking today to see if there's brain activity. And you know what? Like that broke. Like I mean, I can hear stuff like that normally, and not. I mean, I'm sad about it, but it broke me last night because I thought, first off, I have a 3-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
but then I thought, you know what? You never know. You never
Yep.
know. And like our children are blessings from the Lord. Our children are little glimpses of heaven, I think, in a lot of ways, because they're innocence at times, and then other times they're little glimpses of the devil because they're. But I will say this though: do we look at them, and do we take those moments in, because in a blink of an eye it can be taken.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a principal at a school where kids have passed away, and there's no worse thing. I mean, than to have to sit there and talk to a parent that just lost their young kid, and I don't know. So just are we taking advantage of that? And we're entrusted with our children. The Lord has entrusted us with our kids. The Lord has entrusted Charles Draper with 3 beautiful girls,
Mm-hmm.
and He has entrusted me to raise them up in a godly manner so that they can go and do His work and live out the Great Commission in every area of their life. And He's entrusted me with that, and that's part of the Great Commission in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so but taking that seriousness. I was sharing at Bible study last night of yeah, whenever Superstorm Sandy came through in 2012, there was a lot of mandatory evacuations, right? There was areas where they said, you got to leave. Well, guess what? People didn't leave, right? And I say that because I would be one of those stubborn guys. They ain't got this right. How many storms have come through here, right? We got a buddy Ed Ponton out on the Outer Banks, and I don't think they'd leave for any storm. Just in talking, knowing his family and him, but 112 people died in that storm. The highest, the biggest cause of death was drowning, or people remaining in their homes. But they didn't want to leave their homes. They didn't want to leave their stuff. They didn't want to leave all this stuff. But I say that to say, whenever we start talking about salvation and we start talking about following the Lord, like it's that serious. We know what the alternative of that is. If you don't, we know what that looks like. And just are we taking that seriously with our kids and training them up in every
Yeah.
area? So I don't know. I'll stop there. But just yeah.
No, I love it because, I mean, you said it. Our kids are a blessing, and I think our culture has actually shifted, where, especially biblical times, kids really were seen as a blessing. I said earlier before we started the show, I didn't say this well, but it was kind of like they were free labor. Like when you are a farmer and your life depends on farming, once you have kids, your kids are out there doing it with you because you have to. And so in many cultures, especially probably Old Testament culture more so, when you had kids, it was seen as being wealthy because you were able to feed that many kids, one, and then two, you were able to have that labor without actually having to pay for extra labor. And I mean, it's different now, but that wasn't just the reason that kids were considered blessings, and now we've kind of come to this culture where financially speaking, kids are not a great investment. You're definitely losing money when you have kids, but do we still see our kids as blessings from the Lord, or we see them as liabilities? And I think that's a very pertinent question for me. And I love that you just said that, of they are blessings from the Lord. That's what God promises, right? Like that, I say promise, but that's what God speaks of. That's what David speaks of in the Psalms. That's what is kind of seen throughout Scripture. Like so many stories of God's people being established in the nation of Israel is, are we ever going to have a kid? Are we ever going to have a kid? And yet now, do we really see them as a blessing? And so I want to ask you, like, how do you keep that mentality in front of you, that your kids are truly blessings instead of liabilities?
Well, I've never really seen them as a liability. Now they can be a pain in my neck. I'll say that much at times. But
Glad
no,
you said neck there.
yeah. But no. I mean, honestly, like I don't have that. I mean, there's just such a love for them. And I will say, I just had this conversation with a group of men this past Wednesday. We meet with a couple guys on Wednesday mornings, and we talked about somebody piped up and said, talk about divorce, and they said, yeah, divorce rates are highest among Christians. And I said, well, because Christians get married and nobody else is getting married today because there's no financial gain to get married. Like the government has, there's no, I mean, it's actually better to stay single nowadays. And they kind of looked at me and said, you're right. I said, yeah. I said, so statistically, yes. But, if you look at I mean, really just the family in general, marriage is from the Lord. That is it, it's biblical, you see that. And also being fruitful and multiplying, like having kids, like those things, the Lord has blessed us with that. And he's, and I'm not saying everybody's going to get married, but it is, I don't know. I guess I don't look at it from that lens. And just because I love my girls so much. And, yes, there's times where they're a pain in the neck, but I keep coming back to, my sole responsibility. The minute that my girls came into this world, they're my responsibility. Nobody else will do for my girls what I'll do or what my wife will do. Nobody can fill that gap that I can fill as their father. And I will always be their father, no matter what, right? Nobody can ever take that. And that responsibility and weight I've bore, and that's been modeled to me by my dad and other men in my life. So I just think that's just, I don't know, super important to me. I recently watched a video of Elizabeth's first steps, and I used this in my study in my Bible study last night, and talked about, think of a baby's first steps whenever they walk across the room, right? Are you yelling at them? Are you get up, whoa, come on, take that? No, you're not yelling at them. Just, come on, let's, like you're nurturing them. You're calling them to come forward. You normally have your hands out, so if they fall, what are you going to do? You're going to catch them, and you're going to catch them because you're there to protect them. You're there to care for them, and it's a beautiful picture. And I've watched that video, and I just thought, you know what, like this is what we're called to do as parents the rest of our life. And there will come a point in time where they leave our care, and we will, they'll go out into the world, and hopefully we will have given them the tools to be successful. And but that's my perspective, and I can't look at it any other way. Now, there are times where I get irritated. Yes, Elizabeth chunked a rock about the size of my hand the other day at Hadley and popped her in the eye, and she's walking around with a black eye. I was irate. I was not happy at all, but she's 3. She wanted a big splash in the water, and the rock happened to hit my daughter in the eye. They bicker, they argue. There are times, but just like anybody, I just look at Paul, even in the Bible, new Christians that are coming to the Lord. He had to persevere and be patient, be nurturing, and care for them. And even us, like we've messed up. But guess what? We've had people, whether it's your parents, whether it's a grandparent, whether it's somebody else, has come alongside you in life and helped you along. Some may have had more support than others because we all come from different backgrounds, different places and spaces. But at the end of the day, that's what that's what I'm called to do. And that is one of my biggest, and like talk about leave a legacy somewhere. That's where I'm going to leave my legacy. And if I have the opportunity to leave it other places, then great. But at the end of the day, I don't want them to remember Charles. I hope it's all pointed back to the Lord. I don't know if I
That's
answered
good.
your question. I kind of went down a couple of things,
Well,
but
you didn't, because you didn't view them as a liability at all. So, you're too good at this. Uh, no, it's yeah, I just sometimes I'm fascinated where when you have kids, all of a sudden you're you said this actually, the moment you have kids is such a life-changing moment. I had a cousin tell me, like, hey, when you have your first kid, right before I had Jackson, my oldest, he's like, dude, it's in a moment, it's going to change. You're going to see this kid and you're like, man, I'd die for you right away. And they've done nothing. And that's just the way it is. And it's such a, I mean, it really is kind of that surreal moment. The first time you see your kids and you lay hands on them, and it's like, yeah, I love you to the moon and back. I love you, and they've done nothing. They're barely breathing at that point. So it is fascinating. And yet I'm also fascinated with so many people that I've seen. I mean, you talk about it, it being a blessing. You see it as a blessing. But I have seen so many of people who I'm close to, friends that I have, and they have kids, and they love the kids, but they're not willing to give up what they want and what they're doing. And they're still going to kind of live the lifestyle that they want to have, to the point that where the kids can fit in, but only where the kids can really fit in. And it usually drives a wedge within the family in some capacity, in the way I've seen it. And so I think it's such an important question, even before you have kids. But if you have kids, really diving deep and asking the question of, okay, how do I view my kids? Do I view them as things that, well, they can get in the way of what I really want? And if, as long as they're not in the way, I'm good with them. But if they're in the way, like, I'm going to choose what I want? Or am I viewing them from the lens of, like, man, they are a true blessing, so I give up what I truly want for their benefit and for their sake? And I think we have to ask. We've hit all over this, and from our perspective, and this is our perspective, and I think we're probably rightish on this. But I just think it's so important to recognize that from our perspective, what's going to matter most to your kids is the time and the energy that you invest into them and to their relationship that you have with them.
yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and I'll say this. I mean, not even looking at kids, but John, you or anybody else listen to this. What do you value in a friend?
it's the time and the energy they put
It's
into
the
the
time and
relationship.
energy they put into it. So I mean, that's everything, right?
Right.
Like it's time. If what do you value in an employee that you hire? Time and energy that they put into the work. Are they bought in? Are they there? Are they present? Are they engaged in the work at hand? I mean, it's just a constant. You see it in life. Like, if somebody's not going to put time and energy into a relationship, you're not going to keep showing up. Your marriage. What does your wife value in your relationship when you're married? The time and energy you give her. It may look different for each individual wife of what they need and what it looks like, but time and energy is super important, I think, in everything we do. And I'll say this: like, you can be successful and you can still, have fun. Like, here's the deal: I think a lot of people sometimes they miss the mark because we talked about wives last week a little bit. We hit on that, but you got to take care of your marriage, because if that's not intact, then that
Mm.
bleeds over to your kids. And sometimes I think we get that backwards. We say, well, sacrifice, do everything for your kids, run your kids everywhere, do this for your kids. But the next thing you know, you're getting a divorce with your wife because, there's a wedge there because the kids are it. So I think we also have to say, as we look at it, like, the marriage is what started this this whole relationship is built around your marriage. And so you got to make time for your wife. You got to make time to date her. You got to make time for one-on-one time with her. And my kids know, hey, listen, me and mommy are talking. You don't interrupt us. And whenever I come home from work, I'm like, I hug the girls, give them hugs, talk to them for a minute. I'm like, all right, I'm going to talk to mom. Don't interrupt me. I'm talking to my wife. And I'll tell them, I'm talking to my wife. And they kind of look, that's mom. I'm like, it's my wife. So, but I think that's super important. I've looked at my kids and said, don't talk to my wife like that. But just, so I do think, we're investing in our kids. We're going to leave our legacy through our kids. We want to be present with our kids. But I also believe, the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And he is crafty in how he does that. And I think sometimes and I've seen it in friends, I've seen it in even family friends that I grew up in, that the parents were all about the kids and didn't invest in their marriage. And once the kids left, they went their separate ways. So I will give that disclaimer too. So just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Keep that marriage at the forefront. Continue to date your wife. Continue to invest in her. And your children will see that. So caught, not taught. Because what I want is I want my girls to be able to, whenever they are old enough and they start dating, or a boy comes and starts trying to court her and to date her, I want them to be like, sorry, like, that's not good enough, because this is what I've seen. Like, that's what I want. And if I were to have a boy, I would want him to go out and treat whatever girl he's trying to court or whatnot, and treat that girl with respect and love and kindness and care that I treat their mother. So as you look at it, it all works. Like you can't ignore one for the other, because my girls see how I love their mom. And it's funny because they came in and one of them was acting like me and one of them was acting like Betsy. Our anniversary was Tuesday, Wednesday, the 25th, whatever date that was, Tuesday. So they came out, they were pretending to be us and whatnot. And, but it's just, they're going to see that. And my hope is that I set that bar so high that no boy can ever match it, or that I set that bar so high that they don't settle. So, yeah.
I agree. It sounds like your girls are going to be single for their entire lives, which, hey, singleness is a great thing. God invites us into that. And Paul, you talk about Paul. Paul really invites us to be single.
And guys, like, I'll say this, like, your kids are never too young to start praying for their spouses.
I agree.
I pray for my girls' husbands. I prayed for them while they were in Betsy's belly. As I walked around late at night with them, carrying them around the house, I was praying for them, their future, their families. Like, it's never too early. Like, start now. And I would just say that, cover your kids in prayer. There's a lot. We always say, oh, there's a lot they're going through. Well, you know what? We went through a lot too. They're going to be okay. They were made for this time and this moment. They were made to be in this space, and we were meant to be here to raise them in this space, in this moment. So I don't feel bad for them. I don't feel bad for what's going on. Like, they were meant to be here, and I believe that wholeheartedly, and I'm not going to make any excuse for that or feel bad about it. We're just going to move forward and do the best we can, right? But we got to cover them in prayer. And it's never too early to be praying for your 1-year-old's spouse in the future, their family in the future, their health, or their job, or just any of it. Like, it's never too late to be covering them in prayer. And I've had prayer warriors that have covered me in prayer. And I can say to this day, like, my grandmother, John's mom, different family members that I just know have since I was young.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Well, and just even as
I cut you off, I didn't mean to.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm just thinking, as you're sitting here talking about your marriage and prioritizing that, but your kids want to see you loving your spouse. Like, I look at my boys, and especially the older two at this point, like, sometimes I'm like, exactly what you just said, of, I don't want you speaking to my wife that way. Like, this is your mother. But if there's two people in the world, I mean, they don't know how to express this at this point, but there are two people in the world that matter most to them. It's me and it's their mom. So in some ways, I mean, not to make it about the kids, but it's also our duty as fathers to love our kids' mom. And we get to do that. You know, that like this the value of the family unit and how it's interwoven and works together. Of it's not just about loving your spouse, it's about loving your kids. And you love your kids because you love your spouse. And that's someone like well, in our situation, since we're the dads here, she gave birth to those kids. So I owe it to her to love my kids. And in the same way, I owe it to my kids to love my spouse. Like it's a kind of beautiful, the harmony of being in a family and having this different dynamic is that we love, like I love my spouse because I love my kids, and I love my kids because I love my spouse, and I love both of them because I love me and because God loves me. Like I get to say that, and we get to have this dynamic of love being the forefront of how we interact within our family. I mean, I'm just reiterating what you're saying. Like, I love it because it's just, it's the value of having a foundation of real love and seeing that interplay just within the family dynamic.
It's good.
Yeah.
Well,
unfortunately, it is time that we start hopping off here so that I can go play with my boys in the lake.
Yeah, I don't want you to get in trouble.
I'm going to get in trouble real soon if I don't hop off here. Oh, man. No.
Well, man, hey, it's been fun. I always enjoy the conversations, and we'll keep it going next week. I don't remember where we're going into next week, but we'll hop on next week. So to be continued, we're going to keep, I guess, talking about the family as we move into next week as well. Keep building on this, and it's been good. Awesome.
Yeah, it's been good. I've enjoyed it.
Yep.
All right, man.
All right,
we'll talk to you soon.
See you, bud.
All right. See ya.